This week on Parent Unplugged, I'm joined by toddler coach Cassie Gudmundson to talk tantrums, hitting, saying no on repeat, and what to actually do in the moment. If toddler life feels like chaos right now, then this one is for you. Cassie, before we dive into all things toddlers, can you tell us a bit about your own parenting journey and what led you to becoming a toddler coach?
Yeah, of course. So I right now have four kids. My littlest is about 2 months, and then our oldest is almost 7. So it's really fun. I love that I get to kind of help parents while I'm in this stage too with
Yeah.
toddlers. Like I'm fully in it every day. And I love being a mom. I have always really enjoyed it. And my kind of journey to doing this work was a little bit windy. Previous to this business, I was actually coaching creative women, business women, like graphic designers and entrepreneurs. And through that business, I was going through my own motherhood and kind of learning how to balance, learning about child development, Montessori, and respectful parenting and all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I found that a lot of what I ended up talking to my clients about was parenting stuff.
Yeah.
Which was really funny. And we were always having conversations about like toddler moments woven into our business stuff. And then one of my clients at the time, actually, her name is Emma. I work with her now. She is a clinical psychologist and she works primarily with moms and parents. And she was like, "You're really good at this. Why don't you teach parenting stuff more often?" And so about 2 years ago, I kind of took a little break from my business, took a breather, and I was like, you know what? I have so much knowledge around parenting. I have a lot of experience. And I
Mm-hmm.
also had Emma, who was kind of like my background, like clinical research evidence backed, like, yeah, everything you're talking about is backed by science. She was
Yeah.
my person to kind of like back up everything. And so I kind of just dove into starting this business talking about parenting, and it took off. Like people needed what I was talking about, people loved it,
Absolutely.
and it has
Yeah.
just really grown in the past few years.
You're so right. There's definitely a need for it, isn't there? I think we're all
Yeah,
kind of lost in the chaos of parenting sometimes. It's quite hard
yeah,
to know what you're supposed to be doing in the moment. So we definitely need more coaching, especially I think around those toddler years, because they can be some of the more challenging ones, can't they?
yeah,
Because you're in the
exactly.
beautiful chaos of literally managing a small child who's still very dependent on you. So
Yeah.
having the time to kind of do any research or find answers to the problems is definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when I had my oldest and she was a little toddler and I had friends who were moms, I very distinctly remember kind of looking around at all of my friends who were moms and thinking like none of them are enjoying this. And like
Hmm.
everybody kind of seems like they hate their life right now where their things are just really chaotic, and I didn't feel that way. And so I was really asking myself like what am I doing differently that is allowing me to enjoy, like, of course we were still dealing with tantrums, and my oldest like has the biggest personality. She's our most emotional kid, so like there were still tantrums, there was still a lot of big behaviors, but I was like something is different in how I'm approaching this season than
Hmm.
what I'm seeing other people do. And I wanted other moms to be able to enjoy the little years. Like that's something I say all the time is it's obviously going to be hard and there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot you have to figure out, but I enjoyed it. I was still enjoying being a mom, and I wanted my friends and I wanted other moms to be able to do that too.
Hmm. Okay, so toddlers, like they are adorable and completely bonkers at the same time.
Yeah.
So why is this stage so intense emotionally and developmentally for both of us
Yeah.
then, for the child and the parent?
Yeah. So like from the developmental perspective, which I think can help a lot, is just understanding that all of the parts of their brain that are emotional are turned on full, and all of the parts of their brain that are like logical, rational thinking, impulse control, anything like that are off. Like those parts of your kid's brain don't really even start to develop until they're 4, 5, 6 and older. And so they just have like no filter basically, right? Like their emotions just turn on full blast all the time, and
Yeah.
they're little, they're just experiencing everything for the first time. They have all of these kind of natural desires to be curious and to test things and to assert their independence, and so that all of that combined just means like everything that's happening in their world is like to the fullest 100th degree, right? You can't
Yeah.
really like reason with them. And so just kind of understanding that, I think, helps a lot when it comes
Mhm.
to approaching their behavior and even just how you see their behavior.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I found out what's more developmentally appropriate, it made it
Hmm.
easier to understand that, they don't have that impulse control and it's not
Yeah.
manipulative behavior. It's they're perhaps having a problem rather than being a problem. And actually, when we are more sort of supportive or empathetic, actually, you can get a
Hmm.
lot further and reduce that meltdown or tantrum. You can reduce it down by holding space and just being there for them, can't you,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than almost fighting fire with fire, which
Yeah.
can cause us to be reactive, and sometimes it can be hard not to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a more traditional way that a lot of us were
Hmm.
parented, was more kind of like shutting the emotions down, getting kids to just be like obedient. And I think that
Yeah.
does make a big difference. Like I hear a lot of people say to me, "Oh, how do I handle my toddler being defiant or being manipulative?" Or, these sort of words that have really negative connotations. And I'm always telling people like your toddler's not being defiant. They're not manipulating you. They literally don't have the brain capacity to do
Yeah.
that. And those sort of words, if even in your own brain as the parent, if you switch like manipulating to like curious or testing, it
Mhm.
shifts your entire outlook on their behavior and it shifts your response even if they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that can be so helpful when it comes to kind of handling all of their wild energy and tantrums and moments like that.
Absolutely. It's just a shift and a reframe, isn't it? And exactly
Yeah.
that, then seeing it for what it is rather than how it sometimes feels in the moment. And like you say,
Yeah.
because we were often parented that way, it's
Yeah.
kind of breaking free of those cycles of the way that we were raised and understanding that we do know more now and that therefore we can try these different approaches and get a different outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about sharing, or more accurately, yeah, not sharing with toddlers. How do we actually begin to teach toddlers to share? And what's the appropriate thing to do when they just won't? Because I know
Yeah.
you have someone around for a play day and you feel this expectation to get your child to share the toys, and obviously they don't want to share the toys. And then there's this pressure, isn't there, from maybe the other parents, or you worried that
Mhm.
you're being judged, and to feel like you need to hover over and to force your child to share. What should we really be doing in those moments?
Yeah. I mean, I take an approach that I think some people would think is not the correct one, but again, developmentally, we have to think about until kids are about 4, they don't really play collaboratively. There are stages of play that toddlers go through. At 2, 3, even 4, they're playing in their own world or they're playing parallel, like next to their friend. And so I think that's interesting to note is like they're not really going to be sharing toys back and forth. It doesn't make sense developmentally for them. I think the other thing to kind of help reframe this is as adults, are we expected to just share with random people whenever they ask for something, right? Like I always give the example if somebody came up to me in the coffee shop and was like, let me use your computer now, would I just give it to them because they
So
asked? Like,
true.
no, that would be so weird, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't do that as adults. And yet we kind of expect little 2-year-olds to do that, or we give them like, okay, you have 2 minutes, or you've been playing with it, so now you have to give it to your sister or your friend.
Mhm.
It doesn't do what we're hoping for it to do. I think a lot of people are really well intentioned that they want to teach their kids about being generous or being empathetic or being kind, and like we want them to want to share with their friends, right? But that has to come from a genuine place. And so I always approach sharing from this perspective of teaching them how to take turns in a really kind and respectful way. So, and I have kids. I have, 3 kids between 2 and 6, right? They often want the exact same toy. They want what the other one has, and so we do a lot of this at home. But it's just teaching them how to ask for something that the other kid has, right? giving them kind of that language and modeling it of like, oh, can I have a turn when you're done, or can I play with you? And then also teaching them patience when the other kid says no, which is a really important skill that they need to have. They need to kind of learn how to wait. And so that's what I've always done. Sometimes, you know, I get weird looks from other parents if we're like at the library or at the park and my kid doesn't want to share right away. But I also think it's important to give them kind of that language around like taking turns and being genuinely respectful to other people and to other kids. So that's what I've always done. I feel like that makes the most sense just from
Yeah.
like a developmental perspective.
So you would get them to understand that they've got to wait for a turn and the patience. How would you do? What would you hold the boundary when they're sort of getting angry that they've not had a turn or
Yeah.
their turn isn't happening quick enough? That's what my child
Yeah.
would do. He would say, you know, you can have a turn, but that turn just never materializes. What do
Yeah.
I do with
Yeah.
a child who hasn't had a turn yet?
Well, I think that that's where you as the parent have to be okay with holding space for their emotions, right? If my 4-year-old is playing with a train and my 2-year-old wants the train and he says, "Can I have a turn?" and his brother says, "Yeah, when I'm done." And my 2-year-old goes into like a meltdown because he wants the train right now. It's not my job to fix that. It's not my job to kind of distract him from that. I would probably say something like, "Yeah, it's really hard to wait. I hear you. You can either sit here and wait or you can go play with something else." And then if he's like having a little tantrum on the floor and he's crying or he's kicking around, like this is where I always tell people, I'm not going to let him hurt anybody. I'm not going to let him like snatch the train out of his brother's hand, but he's allowed to have his feelings about it. And if he wants to be upset about it for a few minutes, that's okay. Like that is frustrating, especially when you're a 2-year-old. But I think that's where it's really key as a parent to be able to hold the space for that. Because if I can hold the space, if I can be the one who's not like freaking out, who's not like matching this level of like dysregulation that my toddler now has, then he learns, oh, okay, I can be frustrated and it's okay. That's how they learn to handle those emotions, right? And then naturally they learn how to kind of share and collaborate in a way that doesn't involve getting super frustrated or having like a big meltdown about it.
Wow, I guess there's a lot going on there then, isn't there? Because I guess it's you're aiming to model the behavior that you're able to be okay with his
Yeah.
frustration and hold space for his negative emotions. And
Yeah.
sometimes I know, speaking for myself, that can be one of the things that I find hardest, because when they kick off like that, it kind of sends me into that fight or flight mode and I feel really reactive that I want to, you know, stop the tantrum. And
Yeah.
I guess just remembering then that it's not my job to end the tantrum, is it? It's my job to
Yeah.
kind of contain it and hold space for it, but it's not actually my job to end the tantrum, and then helping
Yeah.
them build those skills to wait for their turn.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, you know, parents come to me, moms come to me all the time and are asking, how do I handle this behavior, this moment for my kid? 85 to 90% of the time, it's just you as a mom learning how to regulate yourself in those moments and learning how to just hold space for that, right? Like
Yeah.
most of the work is work within learning how to regulate yourself. Because if you can kind of learn how to handle and hold space for and regulate those big emotions, then that's how your kids are going to learn how to do it too.
Yeah, it's crazy that, isn't it? How the work really does start with us. We all think we want to
Yep.
change the child's behavior, and actually, we just really
Yep.
need to get in control ourselves.
Yep.
um, so, what do we do when toddlers just start saying no to absolutely everything? I found all of mine have kind of gotten through this phase. I know we're
Hmm.
supposed to offer choices, not overuse the word ourselves, but when
Yeah.
it feels like we're hearing no non-stop, how can we actually, what's the response that actually works? What can we do?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many strategies. Like you can start with offering choices. You can start with like giving them more autonomy. You can start with making sure that they do have chances throughout the day to kind of fill up their power bucket and be the one who's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the biggest things that is really helpful is just not being so, I mean, this comes back to you again as the parent. It's like not being so reactive or like personally offended when they say no, right? Like if I'm telling my kids that here are the two choices and they're just like, no, I don't want to do it, then I don't need to be reactive to that, right? It's just my job to kind of come in And if I need to hold a boundary, if I need to help them through something, I can do that.
Hmm.
And the more, like, this is one of those things where the more that you kind of tell them not to say it, the more that they're going to lean into it. They're really testing their autonomy. And so you
Yeah.
have to just be unbothered by it almost.
Okay. So we can offer up more choices, more autonomy, and then just, yeah, try and manage our own emotions and be less phased by the no. Um,
Yeah.
Otherwise they tend to use it more.
Yeah. I mean, like, there are so many situations throughout the day. And I think this is where it's helpful to have like your entire perspective towards parenting your toddler is really seeing them as a whole person who does have opinions and who has needs and who wants to be a part of your family. Like, if I notice that my kids are saying no a ton, there's a ton of resistance and pushback, it's probably because I'm a little too much in control. Like, they
Hmm.
haven't had enough time in their day to really assert their independence or to be in charge or to have their needs kind of heard and met. If I know, like, I've done all those things, I've checked those boxes, I've given them choices, like, we've done what they want, I've filled up their cups, and they're just like, no, I don't want to do any of those things, then that's where I'm just going to come in and be like, okay, I can see you're just having a hard time and I'm going to help you. Like, I'm going to make the choice. I'm not going to get into a big power struggle about it. I think that's, again, that's something that a lot of parents will kind of fall into this cycle of like turning it into a big power struggle where it's
Yeah.
like I've been personally offended that my 3-year-old told me no and now I have to like argue with her about it. You,
Hmm.
if you know that something needs to happen, you can just come in and help them, right? If it's
Hmm.
like you can put on these shoes or I can help you and they're just like, no, I don't want to do it, then I would probably just be like, okay, I can see you're having a hard time, I'm going to help you. And then you
Hmm.
move forward. Like, you just have to be that calm, sturdy leader, as long as throughout the rest of the day you've been
Yeah.
really cognizant of, kind of meeting their needs and seeing them as a person.
Yeah. Okay. Um, there's a lot of pressure on parents, isn't there? Especially mums, to kind of
Yeah.
be endlessly calm and gentle. But what about the days then when we aren't? What do we do with the guilt when we do snap?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It happens to everybody. And that's part of being a human. I think this idea, it, this idea and this kind of like rhetoric that I see a lot on social media of like, here's how to be calm 24/7 and here's how to always be regulated. Like, that's not really what being regulated means. That's kind of like this twisted thing that we see on social media, like you said, where there's a pressure that you have to be perfect all
Hmm.
the time. And I'm sure, like, you have 3 kids, I have 4 kids, like, we know that that's that's literally not realistic, right? Like, that's not going to happen. And that really shouldn't be the goal. And so there are going to be times when you're overwhelmed or you're frustrated or you're angry. And in my experience and what I teach a lot is the best thing you can do is learn how to feel those feelings in a healthy way, right?
Hmm.
Like, we're trying to break the cycle of it's not allowed to be you're not allowed to be angry, right? Just shove it down and be quiet and happy and peaceful. Like, that's, we're trying to teach our kids the opposite of that, and so we have to kind of teach ourselves the opposite of that too, right?
Yeah.
um so it's more about like learning how to be angry in a healthy way and learning how to be overwhelmed or frustrated in a healthy way, and kind of notice when you're getting there before you snap, because there are always signs, right? Like, a lot of parents will tell me, oh, well, I go from 0 to 100. But were there really like 15 signs throughout that morning that you were getting more and more
So true.
dysregulated? You just
Mm.
ignored them, right?
It's always that drip drip effect, isn't it? It's never that one
Yes.
tiny isolated incident. And I agree
Yeah.
with all that, actually. I find the skills I'm trying to teach my children about how to regulate themselves and what to do in those moments are actually the skills that really I need to teach myself and that I'm trying to practice myself. So
Yeah.
sometimes when I do get it wrong, it actually ends up being a pretty good example for the kids that I can talk through it with them and say, mummy got
Mhm.
really frustrated there and I got very loud and I shouted and I'm sorry for that. What could I
Yeah.
do differently next time? And it's quite good because they kind of know the techniques that I try to teach them and therefore they play them back to me. You could have left the room, you could have taken a breath. And I find that actually
Yeah.
works really well to help them learn the lesson whilst also reminding myself that I am still also trying to learn everything I am trying to teach
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like that's something that I don't think we should necessarily feel guilty about. I think that that's something to almost be proud of sometimes. Like I'm not saying that we can all just be like exploding at our kids and then repair and that's fine. But something that Emma talks about a lot from her clinical background is healthy attachment relationships have rupture and repair in them. That's
Mhm.
one part of a healthy attachment. And so, if we want to build healthy attachments with our children, we want to teach them how to have like strong, healthy relationships, then having conflict and then repairing it in a really like true way is important. If we never did that, if we were like perfect robots who were calm 24/7 and never had those moments, they wouldn't learn that skill. So
Yeah.
it's an important part of our relationship.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. Lots of people ask the question of, am I being too soft or too strict? How can we
Mm.
actually tell if a toddler is having a true meltdown where they really need our support, or if they are pushing hard to get what they want and we really need to hold that firm boundary?
Well, I would say it doesn't matter. In either case, you can both validate their emotions and hold the boundary, right? Like
Mhm.
no matter what. Something I talk about sometimes that always gets people up in arms on social media is I say that I don't believe in toddlers fake crying.
Mhm.
Um, and the reason for that is because even if they're kind of fake crying, even if they're kind of like putting on a show for to get what they want or whatever, it like there's a need behind that. They're trying to communicate something. And so I think no matter what's going on, we can both be really warm and empathetic towards their experience and we can hold their boundary.
Mhm.
And that kind of balance of both of those is what is like true respectful parenting. I think it's when we go way too far one or the other way that we turn into either being really permissive if we're just focusing on their emotions and then we start kind of giving in to whatever they
Mhm.
want to appease them, or we are like fully dismissing their emotions and we're just being really strict with our boundaries, then we've gone too far the other way, right? Like in
Yeah.
pretty much any case we can kind of have both of those things,
Hmm. No,
if
I
that
can
makes
see
sense.
that. Yeah, of course. It's finding that middle ground, isn't it? And it's kind of understanding that all behavior is communication. So you're trying to look for
Yeah.
the emotion behind the behavior so that you can unpack what's actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think like we each have to be in tune with our own kids. Like if it's 6 o'clock and my toddler's having a huge meltdown on the floor about something, like I'm going to know, okay, it's almost bedtime or he hasn't had dinner. Like he's hungry. He just like needs to have that need met before we
Mm.
can move on with our day. That's not
Yeah,
giving in. That's just biology. Like everybody gets cranky when they're tired and hungry. That's not the time that I'm going to like dig my heels in and try and make a point to him about something.
no,
But also, if, my kids are like having a huge meltdown because I said no, I can totally validate that they feel that way. And I'm still going to hold my boundary because they need to be able to trust that your word is true, right? Like toddlers really need to be able to trust that like you're going to be the adult who can hold the boundaries that they exist within.
so true. So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got another big one for you. What do we do
Yeah.
then when toddlers bite or hit another child? In the moment, it feels mortifying. What's the
Mhm.
best way to respond calmly but firmly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a situation that almost everybody asks me about.
Yep,
Comes up for pretty much every parent. I don't know a single toddler parent who has not had their toddler hit or bite
true.
or shove some other kid, like sibling or otherwise. Um, and so, I'm here. It's kind of like a multi-step process here, right? Like in the moment, we're going to step in right away. We're going to kind of physically block whatever's going on. But I think the
Mhm.
biggest thing is in the moment that we have really calm energy.
Mhm.
Coming in and being like, no, 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 don't do that. That's kind of adding fuel to the fire. Or sitting on the side and being like, don't hit your friend. Please don't hit your friend. And like repeating yourself over and over is not going to help. You just want to kind of come in, move them or block them and set that really clear boundary. I can't let you do that, or we don't hit our friends, or you can't bite when you're frustrated, or whatever you're going to say.
Mhm.
But then I think the more important thing here that a lot of people miss is just getting curious about why they're doing that behavior. And this is, again, like you mentioned earlier, kind of like the iceberg situation where like there's one part of it that is like the tip of the iceberg that we see, that's the behavior, but we have to understand why they're doing it, because we can't shift them out of that behavior until we understand why. Are they frustrated and they don't know how to explain it? Are they having a hard time being patient? Are they overwhelmed? Are they just curious? They need more sensory input. They're just testing limits. Like there's so many reasons why toddlers do those behaviors. And that's where you really have to spend like 75% of your time getting curious about why it's happening so that you
Mhm.
can give them something else to do that meets that need.
Yeah.
You know what I
Have
mean?
you
Because
ever
like,
had a moment where it's happened to you, a moment in public or at home where things have totally unraveled with your toddler? What's
oh my
happened
gosh.
and how have
Yeah.
you handled it?
Totally. I mean, like, even just having the kids at home there, I remember very distinctly when we had just had our third baby, and he was pretty little. And so at the time I had like a 4.5 year old and a 2.5 year old, and they were playing trains or something. They started fighting, and I had the baby in my arms, so I couldn't get to that. Like, I couldn't do anything. They're
Yeah.
like wrestling each other on the ground, like screaming bloody murder. They're like, my 4 year old's got the 2 year old in like a headlock. They're like fighting over a train, and now the baby is like screaming in my arms. And I was like, I can't do anything about this. Like, I'm just surrounded by chaos right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like it just happens. But that's the thing, is like, the more I think you practice being like calm in those sort of moments, like when my first was a toddler, she hit, it felt like
Yeah.
this is gonna last for it. Like if I don't nip this in the bud now, she's gonna
Mhm.
grow up and be a horrible person.
Yeah,
And I
you're so
think
right,
that's one
actually. I
thing,
remember feeling
right?
like that with my first. I remember being
Yeah.
at a toddler group and him doing exactly that and thinking, like, where have I gone wrong? I can't
Yeah.
believe it's my child that's hitting
Yeah.
others, and that mortified feeling that everyone was going to be judging me, that it was my kid that had hit someone. And now
Yeah.
by like the third, I realize that they all do it. And,
Yeah.
it's just part of it, isn't it? You don't really
Yeah.
think much more of it. Exactly like you say, you kind of, you know how to handle it a lot more and you feel a lot more confident in that and you worry less about the judgment of others.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that ability to kind of like distance yourself a little bit and not feel like this is the end of the world, and like you don't like catastrophize it so much anymore once you have some experience under your belt. And I feel like that's something that's really helpful, because toddlers are going to do that. Like developmentally they have to. That's how they're learning, and it would be just wild to expect any differently. Like obviously we can still step in and have boundaries and teach them and like have consequences that make sense and that are respectful. We're not just going to let them like go at each other
Hmm.
just because like toddlers are toddlers. But I think taking that pressure off of it, of like, oh, I have to fix this right now because my toddler is going to be like a horrible person when they grow up, like that's not really helpful either.
No.
So
Yeah, I agree. If any parents listening to this episode today take away one thing from the next time that they're, say, mid meltdown or power struggle,
mhm.
what would be your most helpful advice for anyone listening?
I would say one of the most helpful things is in the moment that that's going on. If you can stop focusing on what's the perfect thing to say, or how do I get my toddler to stop, or how do I fix this in the moment, you just take 5 seconds and focus on how do I keep myself calm and
Mhm.
regulated going into this situation, because it's not an emergency. That alone will be so helpful. Even just repeating to yourself, this is not an emergency. Like there are
Mhm.
so few toddler situations that are true emergencies where we really need to like rush in and stop something. Most of the time it's not. And if you can have that energy of like, this is not an emergency,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be calm going into it, will make a world of difference, because your toddler will feel that, your little kid will feel that. They'll be able to start to kind of reflect that back to you. And it helps you just get through that moment and actually parent in the way that you want to parent in that moment.
I agree. I think, is it Daniel Siegel that speaks about how we need to turn down the shark music in our
Yeah.
own heads? And that
Yep.
really stuck with me, because I thought that's definitely me, come running down the
Mm-hmm.
stairs with the shark
Yeah.
music, like something terrible has happened. And when I
Yeah.
reflect back on the situation later on, I'm like, the kids were fighting over a toy car. You
Yeah.
know, it's not a life or death situation, and I acted like it was.
Yeah.
So exactly as you
Exactly.
say, if I can bring calm to the situation and calm myself down and turn down the sharp music, it does help me deal with this situation in a way that I want, rather than a
Yeah.
reactive state, which is more
Exactly.
beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well,
Exactly.
thank you for all of that advice today. I feel like that was a huge help. I'm going to put some of that into practice with my 1-year-old for sure. So thanks for
Love
giving us
it.
the
Of
time to
course.
join me on the podcast today.
You're so welcome.